such a wonderful introduction and uh and a very warm good morning and good evening to everybody. It's so nice to be here. We're just halfway through this course on helpful habits. And so the course is based on what we kind of hear about as the 10 non-virtuous actions, and then how to replace them with the 10 virtuous or positive ways of being, the 10 most helpful habits that we can develop in the way that we are out in the world physically, the way that we communicate, and the way that we live our inner life with our attitudes and habitual patterns. So how to turn it from something that often runs away with us to something that's a helpful habit. So we've already gone through understanding the habit cycle. How come even the kind of activities that we have, they the initial instance of what we're reacting to may be well gone, but it develops its own momentum. And before we know it, that momentum becomes a habit that defines the kind of person that we are. And it may not be the kind of person that we want to be or a beneficial way of being. So a lot of it is undoing the habits, deconstructing the habits. So not forcing them down, but actually undoing them so that they're no longer there. So our automatic way of being is helpful. And it is possible to do that. And it's possible to do that in a relatively short time. It doesn't take a whole lifetime. It just takes a concerted effort in knowing what we're doing. And then we've also looked at how we are out in the world. And we'll focus more on that again next week. Last week, we started deep down with the mind because that's where everything comes from. Everything starts with the mind, and body and speech are servants of the mind. So today we're going to go into the speech, how we communicate. So again, it'll be about 2 hours, and we'll have a short break. The presentation today has the traditional Tibetan understanding of the mind and speech, but then also I brought in some Western psychology as well, to do with our internal speech patterns, our inner dialogue. So that is like, it's this really interesting grey area between how we communicate to others in the world and our internal attitudes. There's that inner dialogue that continues. And it really affects us, but becoming aware of it is quite tricky. So I would love to share some of the things that just helped me do that, because once we get our inner dialogue, then we can start doing something about it and really create helpful habits. And of course, there'll be some reflection sheets as well. So I'll just get up our screen share. I was just saying before the class started about this is a painting of a place where I grew up, the corner where I used to live in Melbourne, and it's painted by a wonderful Australian Tibetan artist, Karma Punsog. And yeah, check out his paintings. They're really quite something. And it just perfectly illustrates this bridge between East and West. But today, to help us set our motivation, the two questions that I'll pose to you is, what speech patterns do you have that cause distress, either to you or to others? So often where we become aware of our negative speech patterns, the ways that we communicate that harm others, that we later on regret. What we don't often do so much of is focus on what kind of communication traits do we enjoy, do we want to develop? So we've got to have both sides, isn't it? So let's just take a moment to do a short reflection, set our motivation for the class. Adjusting our posture so that we have the 2-point posture, straightening the spine. Imagining fine thread of light running from the base of your spine, up through your body, out the crown of your head, and feel that all the weight of your body is being supported by your crown, from your crown. So then your posture will naturally adjust. You might find that you sit a little bit more back in the chair. Your spine will become aligned. Head slightly forward, chin tucked in, jaw relaxed, tongue on the upper palate behind the top teeth. Eyes relaxed, lightly closed. Slight smile on your lips. Release any tension held by the neck and the shoulders. Bring your focus inwards just to become tethered to the breath. So not a forced focus, maybe 80% of your attention on the breath, the rest of you relaxed. So you don't have to worry about anything else that arises in the mind. As it arises, let it go. Let all the thoughts and feelings settle, just like autumn leaves, how they naturally come to rest once the wind has stopped. And as you try and maintain your focus on the breath, you might notice an internal dialogue, thoughts or feelings arising. So if they do, just notice and name. Without getting involved in the contents, notice it as a thought or a feeling, an emotion, a memory. The general broad category, what it is, notice it, name it, and let it go, and bring the focus back to the breath. So without getting caught up, without struggling with them, just recognizing them as sensations that pass through your awareness. And keep settling the mind on the breath. And so from within this spaciousness, you may already be noticing various speech patterns. You may be quite acutely aware of speech patterns in your day-to-day life. So think this is our starting point, how wonderful something has become apparent to us. What an excellent place to start. It's not just theoretical, but intimately involved with us. And even just by recognizing these unhelpful speech patterns is the first step towards undoing them. And we can. So we can firmly set our motivation for our own liberation, starting right now with this working on our speech. But then also focusing our mind on what communication traits do we want to develop. And this is the work for others. How can we benefit others? So thinking, who is it that you love listening to? Who is it that you would like to be like? Think of our precious holy gurus and how they communicate. You can think of the holy speech of the Buddhas, able to communicate in whatever language and style spontaneously that is relevant to living beings. and setting our motivation, that we can put in place the seeds for helpful, joyous, clear, wise communication right now to bring forth all of that potential that is there innately within us. We just have to give it its due focus. And then recognize that the momentum of habit can help carry us through this process to achieve the enlightened speech of a Buddha. And so with this motivation, then take a nice deep breath in through the nose, out through the mouth. Gently bring your focus back to the room. And our first slide, did your mother used to say this to you, or your teachers? Think before you speak. So this is in particular one of the best acronyms I've ever come across, because we can look at it as think, is it true? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? And is it kind? So as a memory prompt, this is so incredibly useful. The Buddha actually said, is it true? Is it necessary? And is it kind? So 3 things. But we can add in a couple like this, and it just makes it easier for us to remember, especially in English. True, necessary, and kind. So that's on one side of things. On the other side of things, we've got the non-virtuous verbal action. So speech habits, speech patterns that are the cause of suffering. So non-virtuous means they result in suffering. And the very worst, they're really obvious. Lying, divisive talk, harsh words, and gossip or meaningless speech, which isn't quite so obvious, but we'll see as we go through why that's in there, why there are these 4 main ones. The other thing about non-virtuous verbal actions is that because it's about communication, it includes speech, but also physical gestures. So that's another kind of crossover between speech and body, and omission. So communicating the wrong thing through not saying, and how we communicate with others, as well as our inner self-talk. So at this point, I'll share a little story with you. When I first attended a class on this, Eddie was leading a class, and so he shared this thing of think before you speak, and it must have been a 1-day course, and so then we had our tea break, and so everyone's like, "Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind?" It was the quietest tea break we had ever had. We all just found, which really goes to show how much of our speech is just momentum, is just habit, compulsively filling in silence, just getting sucked into things or being reactive. Very few times do we actually speak with conscious purpose. And so then our speech ends up lacking power, or it ends up running away with us. So what we'll have a look at is these 4 major non-virtuous speech patterns, how we can catch ourselves in the act, and then what we can do instead, what we can replace that with, so that we're not leaving a vacuum and just going, don't say it, don't say it, don't say it, which takes a lot of willpower. And if we are tired, get sick, circumstances change, our willpower goes out the window, and then before we know it, we've said the things. So one of the students here, when she leads the the family Dharma, the kids' classes, she gave this fantastic example for the kids for speech. Everyone had to bring a tube of toothpaste. And so all the kids, they're like, oh, great. And so then she's like, okay, now squish all the toothpaste out of the tube. And she's saying, that's just like when you speak. And then now try and get the toothpaste back in the tube. So the whole day was spent trying to shove the toothpaste back in. And of course, you can't. So once the words are out of your mouth, you can't shove them back in again. They have their own momentum, their own echoes. And the way that we mostly interact with others is through our speech out in the world. It's only very close people, that we interact physically. Uh, thank goodness very few people know what's going on in our mind. It's mostly speech. That's how we connect with others. So it's an incredibly powerful bridge. So how are we going so far before we dive into these four non-virtuous speech habit patterns? How's everyone going? Going okay? Rightio. Any questions or comments so far? Everything's all right? Okie dokie. So let's have a look. So the first thing to avoid lying. So it's not thou shalt not. It's about becoming aware, really trying to avoid misleading others, misleading through speech, gesture, or omission. So there are the obvious lies. There are the little small white lies that we somehow think don't really matter. There are the really big lie from a Buddhist point of view is lying about your abilities. So to put that into context, it's a little bit like being a charlatan, a religious charlatan, or a quack doctor, where you say you can help, where you are relating to the sincere and the vulnerable. So you're in an incredible position of responsibility here, but you don't actually have the ability to help. That's counted as the biggest and worst lie. Everything else is kind of counted as a downfall. And I mean, to stop it right here, one of my favorite shows is in Australia is a TV show called Border Security. And it's just addictive to watch because they come into the country, they've got their luggage, and then the declaration form says, do you have any food? And they say no. And we all know what happens. They open the suitcase and ta-da, it's full of food. And it's like, did you say no? And then they go, oranges, I didn't know they were food. Or they drop their wife in it. I didn't pack it, my wife did. And then the wife is looking like, dare you? And it happens over and over and over again. Why do we do it? Why do we lie? Why is that our modus operandi? Rather than just saying, yeah, I've got food and just hoping, that it'll work. So these are intelligent people because then they even say, well, don't you know who I am? I'm a special doctor or I'm a judge or whatever. And then they think that'll get them out of it, lying. But no, it's like, you signed this declaration. Oh, I didn't know English. Well, you've signed it. So what I have also heard, various studies that if with the little white lies, which we have to include in here, that white lies, little white lies, so they're very inconsequential in themselves. But what happens is that it normalizes lying. So the actual lie itself might not be very big, but we are creating habit of massaging the truth or presenting ourselves in a way that isn't accurate, and it normalizes it. And so the various studies that they've done with organizations say to do with fraud, little white lies, just little smudging the figures here and there normalizes it. Then it makes it easier for the next lot and the next lot. And then before you know it, there's like the global financial crisis. And it's not because anyone's maliciously decided, oh, I'm going to defraud or I'm going to lie about what's happening. It's because the culture, it's like the lobster boiling in the pot. You don't kind of realize. So this we can take heed of, because it means that if we become incredibly used to lying, it makes it much easier for us to lie about the big things and much more difficult to be honest. So we can start right there by looking at our just trying to keep our speech very, very clear. And what I've noticed with white lies is that they are mostly motivated by pride. So we're just trying to save face. So you get there and you go, oh, sorry, I'm late. The traffic was terrible. Actually, the traffic might have been fine. It's just that you slept in or you got procrastination. You can't leave the house. It's so hard, or you just didn't want to come. So I did see this fantastic T-shirt that said, sorry, I'm late. I didn't want to come anyway. So things like that, where we can notice it and go, oh, sorry, I'm late, and then say the truth. Because either way, it's pretty inconsequential, but it's working against that impetus to cover things up, which is motivated by that pride and that grasping at an identity and wanting people to see us in a way that we want to be seen. One of the main things about creating any kind of negative action is seeking to hide it. So once we stop trying to hide it, we're already purifying that action. We're already winding it back. The other thing about lying is that it could be exaggeration. So that's a more subtle form of it, where we're not being specific. So it's like, oh, millions of people came. Well, no, maybe a couple of hundred came. Or we say, oh, you always do that. So that's not correct. It's an exaggeration, and what it does is it weakens. It's not an outright lie, because we haven't necessarily got a purpose to deceive, but it weakens the power of our speech. And it often happens in arguments, which means we become way less credible and also much more incendiary. It's kind of quite an aggressive way to speak. So there's a lot in there, isn't there, with just what is lying. Okay, so the whole range from the big lie, being a religious charlatan or a quack doctor, to little white lies. The results of lying is that we find out in the world people don't believe what we say. We're telling the truth and no one believes us. No one pays any attention. We also find that others cheat us, mislead us, betray us, and we feel very fearful, like surrounded by fear in a very anxious environment. So this is interesting, isn't it? Because if we are experiencing any of those three things, that is a result of in the past, not in the past necessarily even of this life, but in the past lives we've lied, and now we're experiencing the result. And what's ironic is often it can be very honest, good-hearted people that experience this result. And we can get a bit disconsolate about that, because we think, here I am trying so hard to be honest and be sincere, and yet no one believes me. People still cheat me. And that may cause us to give up. But no, no, don't. Just think, we're still purifying. We're still purifying the results, but we're right at the tail end of the karma. So fantastic. Don't give up. What do? We don't give up, and we abandon lying. So we abandon deception, we abandon exaggeration, we abandon misinformation, and we can start with just the little white lies. Not so hard. Places where it might be difficult is if you have to lie in your job, if you have to fudge the figures in your job, if you have to mislead people about things because directions from your boss, that can be really difficult. All the way to maybe having to become a whistleblower. The other place where it's very difficult to abandon lying is if we're amongst our friends. One friend is doing something and we're not saying anything about it. In a way, we're becoming part of that deception. So it often happens with affairs. One friend's having an affair, and we know both husband and wife, or boyfriend and girlfriend, or boyfriend and boyfriend, and we don't say anything. And then later on they go, you knew and you didn't tell me. So that too, it's deception. So what to focus on instead, what to practice instead. So we abandon first we abandon the poison, the negativity that makes things worse. What do we focus on instead? Focus on telling the truth, but not just the cold, hard truth, but the necessary truth. So what's going to actually help in the situation, and to say it kindly. So for many years in my life, I just thought, let's say the truth, but it came out quite harsh and it doesn't land well. It's much better to try and say it in a kind manner and maybe not say all of it. And I must say, I've just learned that through lots of trial and error. There's a huge incentive for us, the benefit. If we can do this, then naturally people will have a sense of trust in you. And isn't that what we yearn for? That people trust us, that they feel safe with us? This is how to bring it about. So now tell me, what questions or comments do you have about this? We probably started off with it being quite simple, and now it's like, oh, I'm not so sure. Yeah, Sunny.
So, you know, just like, how would you tell someone if their husband or wife or significant other is having an affair and you're friends with both of them, and is it your place?
Oh, yes. Well, I've certainly grappled with this one quite a few times, and maybe, many of you have too. So the first thing is it doesn't have to all come out at once. It's a staged thing. There's stages in it. So the first stage is when you become aware that this is happening, and that by you not saying anything, it's deceiving one party or the other. You're now part of it. Then you can go to the person who is having the affair and say, I'm intensely uncomfortable about this. I care about you both, and you're putting me in an impossible position. Can you please do something about it? And say, and then that might be the incentive for them to do something about it, because now, oh, it's not just a private thing, they're becoming aware others know. And then if nothing happens, then the next step to escalate it is to say, if you don't do something about this, I'm going to have to say something because I can't live with this, and give them a warning and a time limit. And then it's like, I'm going to say something this weekend, and I'm I care about you, so I'm warning you. And they may not have been able to do anything about the situation because we're driven by desire against all of our best instincts, our intellectual understanding of the chaos that is going to happen, nevertheless, and they may not be able to stop themselves. And so then, if you are very clear with your motivation, then you may be the catalyst for the situation to change. But I can tell you, you won't be liked for it. So you've got to really set a good motivation and to do it in stages so it's fair, so everybody gets warning. Because honestly, later on, you won't be able to live with yourself. When the other friend finds out that you didn't tell them, you will lose that friend and they won't ever trust you again. And that's terrible. It's terrible just from a human point of view, but also from a Buddhist point of view, because we're trying to make positive connections here. Ah,
So Miffi, so what you're saying is that sometimes you have to be proactive about it. You can't just, sit and just let it go. You have to be,
no, because through omission, through not saying something, you are deceiving others. Yeah. And it's a trajectory. It doesn't start off like that, but it develops into that. The situation changes, so we have to be aware when the situation's changing. Shannon, you too had a question?
Yeah. What do you do about sometimes you feel like you need to tell white lies to increase someone's self-esteem? Like, for example, when I was teaching, some students, their work was really not very good at all, but you would never, ever say that to them. And you would try to boost their confidence, and sometimes that involved telling a little bit of a stretch about.
Yeah.
So what do you do about something like that?
Well, it's a great question, and I'm pretty sure that's exactly what the lamas are thinking about us when they're teaching us. They're like, "Oh my gosh," but yeah, they do encourage us. So what they do is just like a good teacher does, focuses on the grain of truth, the potential, and builds that up, and doesn't focus on how terrible the work is or how bad it is or whatever. So it's tethered to a grain of truth. And so what you're focusing on is an element of things because everything is a dependent arising. So you focus on the dependent, all the elements of that situation that have potential. So it's actually not a lie. It's actually reframing the world to help them. But we could get a bit lazy, and that's when we look at something, a painting by a kitty, and you go, oh, that's, what's that a picture of? Oh, it's our house. Well, that doesn't look like our house, you know, or we go, oh, that's really good. So when you just say, oh, that's really good, that's almost more in the realm of a little white lie because it's not good, but also it's not a helpful thing to say because it just like feeds into their pride. So it's better to, as you would know as a teacher, to tease out, tell me about the painting. So you don't even have to say it's great. Say, tell me about the house. What's that bit or what made you paint it that way? And so you're still giving the attention, um, but without just kind of going down the lazy way of go, oh, that's nice, dear. So it's kind of up to us how much effort we want to put in and how much effort we put in number one benefits us because our mind's becoming very clear and focused on all the nuances of that person through the painting, but it benefits them too. All right. So we all want to be trusted. We all want to be liked. We want to be a safe person to be with. Number one, speaking the truth, but in a necessary and kind way. See, there's that nuance that for many, many, many years I just never ever got. And I think with kids, it becomes more apparent because they can be really crestfallen, and it's quite obvious. But again, we don't have to outright lie. All it means is we've got to really think about what we say. All right, so let's have a look at the next one then, which is divisive talk, sometimes called slander, I think, divisive talk. So what is it? Talking behind someone's back, slandering someone, excessive criticism. So there's a difference between, say, constructive criticism or compulsive, excessive criticizing, finding fault compulsively. Divisive talk can also be generalizations, sloppy speech, and a lot of that is to do with kind of cliches. So the classic one that comes to mind is when you're driving around and people go, oh, women drivers. So it's a generalization, it's sloppy, it's divisive, and it has repercussions. Or you're getting around and you go, oh, the youth these days. It's not everybody, is it? It's just that one person, but we're going the youth these days as a global phenomena. But the main one that's the most obvious and the one that we can catch ourselves doing is talking behind people's backs. So I'll just stop and tell you a little embarrassing story here. So before I came to Lungaby Tumpa Centre, I made costumes, circuses, and I was also an alcoholic because the only way I could get out into the world and communicate with others was by self-medicating with alcohol. But of course, what that does is it takes away your inhibitions. So I would just say what I thought. And I had to very quickly realize that whatever I said, I had to just think that everybody would hear it. Because also my inside voice is very loud. When I grew up, my mother's was three-quarters deaf, so I'm like a ventriloquist. I can do my little inside voice on this side of the room, and people at the other end of the house can hear me clear as day. So there is no way that I can say things behind people's back. It doesn't work. So whatever or whoever I would be talking about, I just got it deep into my psyche that even if they weren't there in front of me, they were there behind me, because pretty much guaranteed they were. And so to be very careful that whatever I would say about anybody, I would be absolutely fine saying to their face as well. So what started off as being a bit of a hazard, my loud voice, actually has helped me become a lot more aware of my speech. And the other thing that on a more subtle level that I've become aware of is that leading classes like this, if I use various people as examples, I say, oh, this one time this lady this or that, or I talk about various groups of people, kids or teachers or doctors, in my mind I'm always thinking there's someone like that here in the class. There's a teacher here, there's a doctor here, there's a kid here, right here in front of me. So I never talk about groups of people as if they're not there. It's always as if they're there. And I can tell you what, that's saved me from a lot of trouble as well, because so many times when I'm told a story about someone, say, with anorexia, there's been someone there in the class with anorexia, or their sister is dying of anorexia. And so you've just got to always think, whoever you're talking about, they are right there. When you're talking about youth, they are there. When you're talking about parents, they're there. Makes it much more immediate. Okay. So divisive talk, of course, just the mean talk that you speak about others behind people's back. That's pretty obvious. The results are we cannot find friends. Well, that is pretty immediate in this life. But it also, if we have great difficulty in forming friendships in this life, if that's your life theme, that's a result of divisive talk in past lives. So it's not on you now. It's not your fault now. So don't think, oh, there's something deep and wrong with me. It's just a karmic result from the past. Or if you find that you're often falsely accused, people accuse you of things and you haven't even done them. Or if you find a lot of disharmony at work. So all of these are karmic results of divisive talk in the past. So if that's happening to you, instead of retaliating, just think, oh, this is the end of that karma. And it's a bigger incentive to double down and be very careful with our speech. The opposite of retaliating. So what to abandon? Abandon habitual criticism. That's hard. And abandon stereotypes and overgeneralization, which is like the slippery slope. It sets up a environment for divisive talk. It may not be divisive at the beginning, but it sets up a perfect environment for it. What to practice instead? Encourage harmony, encourage harmonious relationships. Try and support harmonious relationships in the family, at work. If you can, help resolve disputes. This is a tricky area as well, but at least try and create a friendly environment to help resolve disputes. And instead of the divisive talk, give compliments, be proactive. Actually say the compliment instead of just think it, which takes a lot of presence of mind, because so many times I'll notice, oh, someone's really made an effort and they've dressed up for a special occasion, or they've been incredibly patient with somebody, and you think it, but it's worth then expressing it and saying, wow, I'm so impressed how you handled that situation. So that's actually giving space, airtime, and energy to the positive speech, and that will help grow it. And the benefit, you will never lack friends. You will naturally attract others. So we can look at celebrities and movie stars. So they have this particular charisma. Like Sharon Stone, I remember reading an article about her. She's got this incredible charisma. People just love being with her. Margot Robbie as well. You know, Robbie, she has this incredible charisma. You can't take her eyes off her. People want to be with her. So Sharon Stone was saying, she's aware of that. Sometimes they call it sex appeal, but it's much more than that. It's just this natural attraction that people have. They just feel good being around you. They want your smile to beam down on them. So Sharon Stone as an actor could put that on for the camera, but she also said she could turn it off, and that she could turn it off and she could go down the street and buy a bottle of milk and no one would know it was her. But what is that? That is a result of, in the past, having avoided divisive talk, having created harmony. Then naturally, this is the result. So if we want charisma, this is the way to do it. If we want people to naturally like us, gravitate towards us, avoid divisive talk, and seek to create harmony. Comments, questions? Nothing. There's a question out there. Who has one for me? Yeah, Carol. Go for it.
I'm unmuted. Hi.
Yep.
I have a difficulty trying to stay positive when I'm talking to other people who like to make gross generalizations, like you were talking about earlier. Oh, the millennials, they're so self-entitled, and it's like all millennials like that. And then I sort of will often say, Not all of them. You're saying all of them? Some are not. But it's really hard to deal with other people who like to overgeneralize.
Yeah. Yeah, so okay, so I kind of noticed you're Australian, so my go-to for this is Kath and Kim. Okay. And you know they say use humor. Humor, darling. So and I'm not very good at it. I admit I have to do the exact opposite of humor, which is practice it in private. You know. Um so when people start overgeneralizing, you can kind of take it to its extreme and go, yeah, I know the youth these days, blah blah blah. Don't we sound like our parents? Are we that old? So that'll help wind it back because no one wants to be that old. And or you know, listen to us, grumpy old women or grumpy old men. So to kind of take it and run with it and take it to its ultimate, you know, its nth degree, to bring out the absurdity or the embarrassment. That's one way. Or another is to go really specific, and you could go, but you know what? I have this neighbor who's a millennial and she's amazing, and then say something specific about her because that's irrefutable. And once we go to the specific and we're talking about a person, no one wants to bag a person. They don't want to insult a person. They just want to insult a demographic. But if there's an actual person, we won't actually want to insult them. So it's kind of like understanding the psychology and really using it to change our behavior. So we'll get in after the break, we'll get into this of how we can go from the generalization to the specific, because there's a way that we can set up a habit pattern so we can do that. Because, yeah, I mean, we can just reflect now, like you brought up, Carol, I mean, a lot of our conversation is like this. It's broad generalizations, and they tend to the negative. We very rarely say, oh, this generation, I mean, I don't know if it's the millennial generation, but one of the generations is the least materialistic out of the last 5 generations. They're not into stuff. You know, they're into experiences and into connecting with others. And that is an extraordinary thing, isn't it? But how much do we talk that up?
Good point.
As a generalization. So, yeah.
That's good. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I mean, the other thing too, so the divisive talk now has been solidified even more in the algorithms in social media. So over and over again, how we can see that. So social media is built on a commercial basis. So the more people involved, the better, the more ads. And the best way to engage people is through anger. So the algorithms are designed to create divisiveness, to be controversial, and to engage people with outrage. Whether you agree or disagree, you are engaged. And so they have now created their own momentum, and the genie is well and truly out of the box. So in that little microcosm of social media, that's what's happening. The algorithm is based on divisive speech, on hate speech, because that's what gets the eyeballs and the clicks. So again, it's not social media's fault. Social media is a result of us, human beings. We've just brought into palpable existence what naturally happens. But now we've created this feedback loop, because now social media, divisive speech, creates more divisive speech. So it's like a runaway train, that one. And luckily there are also studies on this of what to do about it, which is to go back to the personal, the human, the individual. And then people go, oh yeah, well, I don't mean them. I don't mean your best friend. I mean everybody else. But at least there's a little chink in there. So just to be aware of that too, even if when we're on social media and we find ourselves being what's called triggered, but it just means getting annoyed, just to be aware, aha, I was just hooked by the algorithm. And then you can just stop it right there. Then at least you're abandoning that. All right. So next one, which takes us to harsh words, harsh speech. So what is it? What is harsh speech? Well, it's threatening, for one, threatening communication, aggressive. It can include swearing, yelling at people, raising your voice, sarcasm, and I put in here teenage grunts, where you don't actually say anything, just go, huh. All of that is harsh words. Why is it called harsh words? Because it hurts. So this one I found quite interesting because it's pretty much how we can tell if it's harsh words is not from our side, but from how our speech lands. So just pleading, oh, I didn't mean any harm, it doesn't cut it here. The meaning of our speech, of our harsh words, is if the other person is hurt, it was harsh. So it's back on us. So for instance, with swearing, before I came to Lungareet Tongue Centre, I spent a lot of time with a whole bunch of drunken performers and musicians and everything, and part of the whole culture was to swear like pirates. And it was very creative. The amounts of, people could swear in Old English, and they could swear in German, and they could swear in Russian, and the drunker we got, the better the swearing became, more inventive. Then I came to Lungareet Tongue Centre, and I tell you what, it wasn't very, my natural speech of swearing like a trooper was not appropriate anymore. And the first few weeks when I was at Lungareet Tongue Centre, everybody's eyebrows would just shoot up when I'd speak. And I go, what's going on here? Then I realised I'm a bit foul-mouthed. Then I got such a shock because I'm out of my normal context and into the context of a Buddhist centre. I didn't say anything for a very long time. So it's not that swearing is bad, it's contextual. Swearing with a bunch of friends, especially say if you're a first responder, there's a lot of black humor that you say amongst yourselves that you'd never say in public. You probably know if you're using harsh words because your kids will reflect them back to you. So if you listen how your kids speak, that's how you speak, and that can be quite confronting. Yelling, just raising our voice, it always harms others. It means that what is going to land isn't going to land 100% positively. It may land, people may pay attention, but it's also going to hurt, and that will have consequences. Things like sarcasm, where people plead that I didn't mean anything by it. It does hurt. So yeah, harsh speech. But even like I remember I could always tell when it was a public holiday because the neighbours would argue because they'd be home and now they're stuck together for more than a few hours, and it's just like, oh, it must be public holiday because they're yelling. But you could feel the whole neighbourhood just flinching because it creates such a negative atmosphere, doesn't it? It's really scary. Harsh words. And yet, when we're the one who's being angry, we feel justified. So we don't want to be hurt by other people's harsh words, and yet we want to put our harsh words out there in the heat of the moment. So the results of harsh words are that around us, we often hear distressing sounds. So our oral environment becomes noisy, building site construction noise, lots of yelling and screaming or barking dogs, lots of arguments around us all the time. It also the result of harsh words is we say something and people take offense. We didn't mean anything. This happens to me a lot. I didn't mean any harm, and yet I say something and people get offended. or we live with people that are abusive, that have a harsh way of communicating. It's not gentle. So all of this is a result of harsh words, probably in past lives, possibly even in this life. Just through how we mirror each other, if we speak in a really harsh and aggressive way, the natural response is for people to mirror that back. So what happens? We don't know that we are speaking harsh words. We're just being reactive. We're just trying to express ourselves, or we're retaliating. We don't even realize that we're doing it. The first inkling that something's gone wrong is everybody's yelling at us. And we go, what? Why is everybody being so mean? Or why are they yelling at me all the time? Da, da, da. And it's because they're reacting to us. So what to abandon? Abandon using words that cause distress, or abandon communicating in a way that causes distress. So how do we do that? We think we're in here for the long game, the long term, not the short-term gratification of tit for tat, not the short-term gratification of letting them know what I think. That's like the drinking the salt water. It's cool at first, but it's much worse later on. So we have to think of the long term here. What to practice instead? Speech that causes pleasure, gentle words. Speech that brings happiness to others, a smile to their face that makes them relax, makes them feel good. So we all know this, say the difference between criticism or abuse and constructive criticism. The same point may be being made, but it's how it's made. Is it made gently and kindly? Or is it made boom, 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 like just clear and brutal? Or is it made to hurt, to hit you where it hurts? There's a whole range, isn't it? It's the same point being put across, but it's how it's put across. The benefit of avoiding harsh words is that people naturally speak well of you. They speak well of you behind your back. Yes, people are talking about you behind your back, and it's all good. You have a good reputation. And this is what we want, isn't it? We want people to think well of us. And, we can't control how people talk about us, but wouldn't it be nice to know that people actually recognize our qualities? Wouldn't it be nice to know that we could be the catalyst for other people speaking positively? So how are we going with this? Harsh words, harsh speech. Is it a little confronting? Yeah. So we've gone through the 3 overtly bad ones, and you might have started at the beginning going, "Oh yeah, I'm a fairly kind, decent person," and now you might be thinking, "Oh," but that is good. It's good to notice. Okay. So Anna.
Miffi, I'd love to hear what you might say about this. Sometimes I feel like if somebody's harsh towards me, I'm like a deer in a headlight. And that's an awful example, but I think you get, I get so shocked. And I think, I've learned, I'm trying to find ways, yes, to be kind, but to also set boundaries. And I'm trying to think of, it's rare this happens. And sometimes if somebody's harsh, there's something going on in their lives, which I understand. So I know a classmate of mine a few months ago, the nicest person, but is going through the roughest time. And, I just shared something in class like we always do. And she just had a momo and just attacked me. And which was uncharacteristic for her. And all I could say in that moment was I could speak for myself.
Mhm.
And then because you tried to kind of put me down or whatever, and I didn't want to retaliate, but I also wanted that boundaries. I can
Yeah.
speak for myself, boundaries, and that's
Yeah.
all I could utter in that time. And I think I would love to be like what a bodhisattva would be, to be skillful and just, be able to say, hey, what's going on with you? Or say, hey, let's talk after class. But I know I have to practice that.
Yeah.
It's shock sometimes.
Yeah, that's right. And actually shock, being like a bunny in the headlights or a deer in the headlights, can be very useful, because what it does is it stops us retaliating. So that stops things getting worse. So while it's not very satisfying for us, it's stopping the situation getting more aggressive, and that is good. But what happens then is we leave it at that. So actually, that's just the first step, to not retaliate. So to abandon harsh speech back again, fantastic. And you've done it just because you're in shock. Okay, that's great. We can use that. But then we go away and we feel bad about it, or we think about all the things we wish we had have said harshly back again, all of the, the rebukes or the cunning retorts, or, all those kind of things. We kind of get into revenge thoughts, replaying a fantasy of how it could have been instead, all the things I wish I had said. So actually, we have the shock, we don't retaliate. Then we can go away and we can think, what's a skillful, useful, kind way that I could have responded? It might have had to be strong and clear. You may have had to remove yourself from the situation. You may have to take it as a teaching moment and come back and educate that person and say, that's not factually correct. Actually, it's blah, blah, blah. But all of those things, they're not going to work in the moment anyway, because once someone is angry, they have lost their reason. So any reason that you say, any factual thing, any clarification is going to go on deaf ears. It's just going to make it worse. In the poker world, you'd say they're on tilt. There is no way they're going to be able, they've lost their reasoning and logic. Forget about it. It's all emotion now. So it's either remove yourself from the negative situation or use humor. So a bodhisattva would be able to use humor. And what humor does is it takes you out of the negative mind state and it shocks you into a funny one. So it breaks the momentum. So there are different ways that we can break the momentum. So sometimes, when someone's just having a hysterical episode and you slap them on the face, they go, huh? And it stops them in their tracks. So it's very politically incorrect now, but it works. Other times you might be going along full ball and you just fall over and hurt yourself, and it stops you in your tracks. Other times in an argument, if you actually love the person but you're in the middle of an argument, you get to a bit where you just come to absurdity and you can both burst out laughing. And it changes the momentum. A great bodhisattva would be able to use humor, would be able to use a Zen moment or a Dzogchen moment to say the thing that cuts through and wakes you up. Lama Yeshe could do that with that infinite love in his heart. It takes a really skilled person, but that's what we can aim at. But the thing is to remember, that's what's happening on a neurological level. What we're doing is we're changing the momentum, we're changing the tone. And it's not through logic. Logic is what happens afterwards, where you can come back to the person and go, hey, I felt really uncomfortable there and really upset and was so uncharacteristic of you and what was going on. And it's when they've calmed down. It's afterwards. And it's also when you've calmed down and you're not reactive anymore. So thanks, Anna. That was great. And now, Mary Kota.
Hi. I recently had an exchange with my sister where we both used harsh words, and she's very angry with me. And so I guess my question is, what's the best way to go about, having reconciliation? Like, I was thinking about sending her a note, but I feel that she's wrong in her position, but I don't know how to. I don't want to be having yelling, screaming
Yeah.
matches with her from now on.
Yeah, that's right. So, okay, there's a couple of things there of how to do a reconciliation. Okay, so there's two things. One to do with speech and writing a note. Just this isn't a Buddhist thing, but it's just something I heard and it's very, very useful. You write the note 3 times. The first time you write it, basically it's to yourself and you just get everything out there. And this is good because you're not saying it to anybody else. You're just writing it down and you're seeing the lay of the land, and it can be quite revealing. You can actually get to some truths there that way. Do not send that one. That urge to I just want to let them know what I think. Do not send that. No. Then you calm down, you feel a bit better because you've got it all out on paper and you've said all the things, and then you write another note. And then that one you're kind of beginning to try and phrase it in a way that's going to be beneficial to them. But I tell you what, that second note, you're still driven by the urge. You just want them to acknowledge what you think. Don't send that one. The only person that has to know what you think is you. That urge to make somebody else know what you think, forget about it. That's pride and attachment and anger all tied in together. Don't send that note. And you count down a little bit more, and then the third time you write it, you're writing it for them. You figured out this is my truth. They have no idea about it. They can't even grasp it. This is them. This is the bit of my truth that's going to help them and be relevant. This is how I can help them. This is the bit that relates to their life, that helps them in their journey. And the whole urgency for you to be acknowledged and understood and recognized and everything that's all about me, while you're purporting to write them a note to help them, all of that has calmed down and now you're writing it for them. So that's the one you send.
Okay, great.
So
Thank
this
you.
is just actually, this is something that I heard on Facebook, and I think it might be, I don't know, it's like from some army guy or something. I don't know. But anyway, it's very useful.
I will do it. Thank you.
The other thing though, Mary, for reconciliation that just came to me was that the Buddhist approach for how to escalate the relationship with people, escalate communication, or the skillful means of helping sentient beings. It's called the 4 activities of drawing disciples, or the 4 activities of helping others. So it's peace, increase, power, and wrath. And it's in that order. So first off, peaceful means always start our relationships being kind and gentle. And generally, things will go in that trajectory. Then if things go wrong, increase, do something really nice for them, get them a present, go above and beyond. You do it first. Don't wait for them, you do it first. So you're having difficulties with someone at work or with your sister, just get her something she loves. Buy her some chocolates, get her a bath bomb, a movie ticket, a fantastic book, go for a walk in a park, whatever it is. A present, something that will help them feel happy. So that's the increase. And then if that doesn't work, you go to power or charm. And so that's where you get a little bit stronger, and it might be, hey, if you don't do this, I'm going to have to do that. So it's not the giving, now it's kind of the threatening, but it's a kindly threatening. It's kind of giving a warning. If you don't change that behavior, I may have to move out. So it's escalated a little bit, but often we go from peace to I'm moving out. We forget to give the present bit. Now you might notice this, it's also a good way to, relate with kids. First, just create a peaceful environment. If they're playing up, give them an incentive. And then if that doesn't work, then it's like, well, then I'm going to have to take this away. And then if that doesn't work, then it's wrath. So wrath isn't anger. Wrath is forceful concern, where it's like, hey, get it together. It's like an intervention. It's where soft, gentle words are not getting through the delusion. So you have to find a better way to get through the delusions. But it's not harming in any way. So in terms of a reconciliation, Mary, that's the order to do things in: peace, increase, power, wrath.
Notes, and I will think about it and do it. Thank you.
Yeah. Anna, just before we have our break.
I'll be brief. My story continues with this person because I knew that something was up with her. It was very uncharacteristic. So the next day I decided, it's not about me. She's going through a hard time. And I wrote her an email just to say, hey, because she's a Dharma student. Hey, whatever happened yesterday, maybe we can just let it go. Just think of it as we were purifying stuff. Even though it was inappropriate what she did, I didn't go down that road. I just thought, we were purifying stuff. Let's think about that. And I hope we're still good.
Yeah.
And in the end, it doesn't matter how she interpreted it. In the end, I felt really good about it. And I think in the end, she felt good. She took it as an apology.
Yeah.
And I thought,
Yeah, right.
So be it. So it had a good ending. And I felt good. It was surprising to me how good it felt to be positive and take that perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you can almost develop a special thing where each time you see each other, you can go, how are you going? Are we good? So you've got a bond now from the difficulty where you can be kind to each other. Because on a really basic level, if people act out their worst selves and you're still there for them, that's what creates trust. So it's not that you're condoning bad behavior or anything, but you haven't associated the person with behavior. You're still there for the person, and you're going to help them with the behavior. But it doesn't matter how much we say that to people, it's actually in the doing of it. So that's really great. You've written a note and then you're there. You still see her and you're still friendly. That's actually what counts.
Thank you, Miffi.
Yeah, that's great. So fantastic. Very productive so far. It's about 1:15 for me. So let's take 5 minutes. We're back in 5 minutes. Have a little think and let everything settle. And then we can go into the little bit about just meaningless talk, but also the inner self-talk. So 5 minutes, everyone.
Supposed to manage other people's speech towards you, that.
Yes. Yeah, so I mean, on the worldly level, there's probably lots of resources online about how to de-escalate neighborly disputes, and go and avail yourself of that. But that's not enough, because sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But there are many skills that we can have to how to de-escalate being harassed by neighbors. And it's also good to know your rights and to know, what groups that can help you, things like that. But from a Buddhist point of view, we can also add to that. And so the inner story is to recognize, number one, this is a result of our previous unskillful actions, and now it's coming back at us. And so one, great, as it's happening, now it's over. That karma is finishing. The other conclusion to draw is, this is a result. I don't like the result. I am never going to do the cause again. So it galvanizes you into not engaging in divisive speech or harsh speech. This is quite hard, because often what happens in our retaliation, we do it all over again. So we set up a whole nother karmic trajectory. I mean, it happens with everything. This is the tragedy of karma. So it gives us an inner reason to kind of keep our cool. And then, well, just as a rule of thumb, people act badly because they're unhappy. So there's something wrong with the neighbor. It may be you, it may be the neighborhood, it may be something totally unrelated, but it comes from unhappiness. So again, so peace didn't work, so now increase. Is there something that you can do at present something that you can do to help your neighbor, that you can offer, that will make them happy. There may or they may not be, but even just, I don't know, just some kind of token thing. The hot cross buns at Easter or whatever it is, increase. It goes against the grain, but it's worth a shot, because often that one gesture of kindness or generosity to a neighbor can turn the tide. Or you can just find, with that present of food is usually a good one, ask if you've done anything to offend them. So you may not have, or they may be a perceived slight, all sorts of things. I mean, people are not at their best when they're ill, when they're suffering. So there's a lot that you can do, but we can add in the Buddhist one. But yeah, it's like, it sounds like you've squirted the toothpaste out of the tube, getting it back in again. So perhaps an apology of some sort would also go a long way. And that's like, ugh, that's a big ask, isn't it? But there's a big incentive there for neighborly harmony. So it's going to need a lot of work, but this is great, because this is what's called a wrathful teaching. So we get nice presented teachings from our precious gurus, and we read books, and we have all of these teachings, and they come in a peaceful, gentle way, or they might be really inspiring, but sometimes that doesn't actually galvanize us into action or do anything. It's just nice. But then something goes wrong, and it's hard, and it's hard work, and it's really confronting, and we put a huge amount of effort in it, and it pays off for us. It makes us a better human being. And that's called a wrathful teaching. There's no other way to get through to us. And so one way you can look at it, it's the Buddha's manifesting as the angry neighbor for us to be able to practice, to really put it into practice, not just all nicey because it's easy. But so that's what's called a wrathful teaching anyway. So good. Thanks, Shannon. Rightio. And I mean, we've all been there. We've all had terrible neighbors. And I mean, the good thing about that is it's inescapable. So we really have to work hard. And that will definitely benefit us, even if it doesn't benefit the neighbor. It's just not necessarily fun. The benefit and the fun comes later. When you become a stronger, more resilient, patient person, or when it just gives you a better, more confidence in yourself to withstand difficulty. So let's just quickly have a look at the gossip one. Gossip or meaningless speech, which seems pretty innocuous, and it is. But what it is, like the little white lies, it sets up a momentum that becomes almost unstoppable. So idle chatter, meaningless talk, just shooting the breeze, because it's speaking without being aware of our purpose, it naturally degenerates. So if you're just having a chat with someone for no particular reason, or just small talking, and this happens with neighbors, very rarely does it end up with you both wanting to save the world. Mostly it ends up with both parties just bitching about stuff. So what starts off as neutral, meaningless, just kind of idle chatter, idle speech, if we don't bring our awareness to it, it naturally degenerates. It goes to the lowest common denominator, and it brings out the worst in us. So that's the danger of it. Also, flippant things said in passing or on Facebook can really harm people. Joking around with someone just going, "Oh, you idiot," that harms people, especially kids. There's other things of meaningless talk, just nagging, just continuously nagging's one. The other, always seeking to have the last word, telling tales. So all of this has a negative effect through repetition. So the thing in itself, what you're saying, pretty innocuous, but it's the repetition. So with nagging, it weakens our speech and it makes people averse. They're never going to do what we're asking when it happens with nagging. And having the last word, it sets up a confronting kind of relationship, and people just won't want to speak with us. So there's a lot in this one. The results of meaningless talk is that no one listens to you, even when you say something that's important. Even when you say, hey, the house is burning down, everyone goes, oh, whatevs. So people don't actually listen to what you say. And if you find you are a person where you can say things and it doesn't get through, it's the result of in the past having meaningless speech. Also, if you lack respect, you have no power. Your words have no power. You have no status. People just go, oh, that's just you. They don't go, oh, that means something. Or you have that inner condition of feeling you can't express yourself. And this is terrible. It leads to such deep isolation. This yearning to connect, to express yourself and being unable to, like a glass ceiling, like banging up against the glass, can't get through. So all of that is a karmic result, or is a psychological result of meaningless speech. So that's a bit shocking, but actually it's great because that's something that's really easy to do something about. So number one, what to abandon? Abandon compulsively filling in the silences. This is great. When you come to a Dharma center, it is one of the rare places in the world where you can sit and say nothing and it's not weird. It's okay. And it's a great little practice to have when everyone's sitting around feeling really uncomfortable. You can just smile and not say anything. Sit with your discomfort. And then once the discomfort is gone and you figured out what you want to say, then you can say it. But to create that gap, that space between the compulsion to say something and the saying it, we've got to stretch that out. Don't compulsively fill in the silence. Avoid nagging. So the way to avoid nagging is to figure out what you want to happen, figure out the best time to say it, and then to just say it once and say, I'm going to remind you again in 20 minutes. And then remind, and then if they don't do it, don't say anything. So again, from our side, it's the discipline of speech. We become in control of our speech. And the other people know what's what, and then they can figure out whether they want to do the thing or whether they want to have the consequences of not doing the thing. But it really clears it up. As Venerable Robina often says, what's your business and what's their business? The compulsion to have the last word or to speak, to dominate, to just dominate a conversation because you just want that attention, and the attention is never enough. All of that kind of try and withstand those compulsions. And the fact that it's difficult is indicating that something is working, that neurologically you're rewiring your brain. You're changing your habits. The fact that it's uncomfortable and takes some effort is a good sign. It means it's already changing. What to practice instead, know your purpose, the reason that you're speaking. So in particular, when we're talking to our neighbors, we're not going to talk about death and rebirth, well, we're not going to talk about our kids or whatever it is. We're just going to talk about innocuous things like the weather. Not politics, not religion, not relationships, possibly our pets and the weather. So not necessarily deep and meaningful topics, but if you have a purpose, which is I want to create neighborly harmony. And by doing so, I want to bring peace to the world. And then you talk about the weather. It's going to be fantastic. The other thing is to have the courage to speak about meaningful topics. So when the time comes to talk about someone's will, or to talk about someone's illness, or to talk about it's time to move out of home, to actually have the conversation, not put it off. And particularly at milestones like Christmas dinner, where most of the time we just avoid everything of importance because we don't want an argument. And then next year we see those people again. We hardly see them throughout the year, and the same thing happens. And then the next year, one of them's died. It's all over, too late. So to have the courage to actually speak about the meaningful topics when you can is also important. And the benefit, people will listen to what you say and they'll value what you say. They'll actually value it. So I'll tell you another little story. So my partner Eddie, who teaches here at Library Topper Centre and teaches Discovering Buddhism and a lot of the in-depth classes. So he only talks about deep and meaningful things. So he's the worst person to take to a party because he's the one that's going to talk about death. And he's going to talk about it immediately over dinner. So there's always, luckily, one other person at the party that also wants to talk about death and emptiness, two favorite topics in the world. And you will find Eddie and that person in a deep and meaningful conversation for hours at the dinner party while everyone else is cracking jokes and whatever. So I don't know if you ever want someone like that at your dinner party, but it's pretty funny from my point of view to watch. The other thing that I've seen is that no one wants to talk about anything deep and meaningful at the dinner party. Eddie will just leave. So there was one party where I didn't go to it because I hate dinner parties. And the host rang me up and said, we're in the middle of dinner and Eddie's just gone. And I'm like, yeah, don't worry about that. He sometimes just gets up and goes for a walk when he's bored. Anyway, slipped out. Anyway, so a few hours went by and Eddie came back at dessert and they're like, you all right? Are you all right? He's like, yeah, I just went for a walk because it's a bit boring. Came back for dessert. I drove him home. Anyway, needless to say, we never got invited out again there. So don't necessarily do what we do, but it gives you an idea. So what to do, how to make sure that you don't have an argument at the dinner party. So we can get strategic about this. And you can come prepared. So in the olden days, I used to come prepared with what's your favorite book? Tell me about your favorite book. But nowadays nobody reads. So that just insults people now. It's like, oh, you think I'm no good because I don't read. So now you can just say, oh, what's the best movie that you saw this year and why? What was it about it that you liked? And it's quite a nice one to say because people get to talk about what matters to them, but it's not personal. It's via a movie. And it's a nice way of starting a conversation. It's kind of fairly safe ground. It can degenerate into, oh, have you seen this one? Have you seen that one? And then no one's saying anything about it at all. But just to actually, why did you like the movie? It's a nice way to start a conversation. The other thing that you can ask is, oh, what's an unexpected thing that happened to you recently? It's another good one. Anyway, I'm sure you can stick that into AI. What are some really good conversation starters? So we've got a little bit of time now to look at the inner self-talk. Destructive and positive. So we're pretty aware of the destructive self-talk. That's that internal commentary, the continuous criticizing, being judgmental. Telling, like, if other people could hear how we talk to ourselves, they'd be shocked. It's so mean a lot of the time. Oh, you idiot, you'll never amount to anything. Everybody said you are no good, you'll never be able to do it, blah, 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 blah. All the bad things, all the things you hate about yourself continuously. And we don't even know that it's going on, but we're saying it all in words, and it's the echoes of what other people have said to us. Then we might blame them for saying it, but actually they said it, but we're holding on to it. Why did it stick? Why has it now become an internal voice? That's on us. That's that internal voice. It's like revealing our disturbing emotions and also feeding them. We have a compulsion to dwell on the negative because we're hardwired for that, because that's what's kept us alive. But it hasn't kept us happy. The more we use negative self-talk, the more we perpetrate our own unhappiness. So it keeps on going, whether we're aware of it or not, it keeps on going. And so often if you're new to meditation, you'll sit down and you'll become, because everything else quietens down, you become aware of that inner self-talk. Maybe even this meditation we did earlier in the class, you become aware of that chatter, and it's not nice. But it's good to become aware of it and to catch it and to pay attention to the words but don't believe them. So the first thing, like Venerable Robina says, speak it out. Become aware what the words are saying. They're they're valid, but they're not true. So they are a truth, they are an experience, but what they're telling you is not true. But we have to hear them first. So we have to have the courage to speak it out, to write a journal, to talk to a trusted friend. And then change it over to the positive. And so what it is starting to use fluid terminology, and it softens it. And I'll tell you what, this is a huge challenge for me. I could do this instead of, oh, you should. He possibly meant this, or he possibly meant that. It might be possible to do this, or it might turn out like that. Or they sometimes, often we say, oh, you always do blah, blah, blah. Just change it to you sometimes. So, changing our actual words then changes our entire experience. It's so powerful. There's a shortcut to this. What would the Dalai Lama say? Doesn't that change everything? How would the Dalai Lama describe it? Even just the tone of voice would be different, wouldn't it? What would the Dalai Lama say? Or how would your best friend describe this situation? So, we can already see there's a lot that we can do there in that internal environment. There's a whole lot of unhelpful speech patterns that I found a list from a book called The Happiness Handbook by Dr. Timothy Sharp. Really excellent book. And so in it, there's a lot of speech patterns in there. So I thought I'd just mention a few because they're useful to know. So overgeneralization, where we come to a general conclusion that's based on one event. So already we can see how there's this slippery slope. So an example that he gave was, oh, he didn't want to go out with me, I'll always be lonely. Or I didn't get the job, I'll never find work. You can see what happens there, isn't it? And it's just in one sentence, and we've changed our reality. Filtering, where we just hear the negative things. We listen out for the negative things, and anything that's positive we dismiss. So the example, I know the boss said she liked my work, but she also pointed out a few mistakes. She must think I'm hopeless. The all or nothing thinking. This comes along if you're a bit of a perfectionist, if you suffer from procrastination. It's I won't be able to get all of this done. I may as well not do it. Or the job it's so high pressure. It's so awful. There's nothing good about it. So you can see how we've got like a seed of reality in there. We've got the fact of the situation, and we've just jumped to a conclusion, and we've believed the feeling. And we've kind of said it without even knowing that we've said it. And the moment we've kind of labeled it like that, it becomes our reality. Oh, okay. So, oh, you found it. Fantastic. Oh, there's another one. Okie dokie. So, there's a few other ones. So they're over filtering, all or nothing thinking, personalizing things, taking things personally. So something happens, someone's in a terrible mood. I must have done something. What did I do? I didn't do anything. So we personalize it. And we can even personalize if the photocopier doesn't work. We take it personally. It makes us personally upset. It's just a thing. Catastrophizing. What if I make a fool of myself in class and nobody likes me? Or everybody laughs at me? Catastrophizing is often the kind of thinking we do late at night when we can't sleep, we've got insomnia. Mind reading, assuming, assumption. Man, assumption is the root of all evil. I can tell they hate my shirt. So-and-so is talking to that person, they must like them more than me. So again, it's an internal conversation that we don't even know that's going on, but it affects us. So the thing is to hear it with consciousness, not believe it, but at least hear what's happening. So we're separating ourselves out from it running along. Emotional reasoning, it's like emotional bargaining, fortune telling, I'm bound to fail, for instance, it's like a fortune telling in a negative way. Magnifying or minimizing things, gaslighting. So what do? What we do is, and this is it's just a worldly way of dealing with it, but I found it very useful because it's a way of developing our discriminating awareness, which is one of the Buddhist wisdoms, to move from general to specific. So we change our statements, which are very generalized, to a particular one, and how we do it is by anchoring them in the place, a time, a person, and an activity, and using soft, gentle language so we leave room for a positive outcome. So I've got some examples here. How do we do it? And it's fantastic because once you bring your focus to it, it takes some effort, but by putting this effort into our speech and the way we think, it will pay off with clarity and a relaxed mind, with feeling safe. So for instance, if you think you have the thought, oh, nobody understands me. So that's kind of a feeling, actually. We can change it to, Bill didn't understand me this morning. So it's the person, it's the situation, it's the one time, it's what happened. It's actually more factual. And then it gives us some room to look at the emotion with it without reifying what happened. Nobody understands me. Or when you're feeling terrible, everything's terrible. The world's gone to hell in a handbasket. Well, that may be true, but actually the fact is I woke up feeling bad this morning. So in our mind, we're catastrophizing, but we can pull it back to reality and go, this morning I've woken up feeling bad. It's one instance, it's a feeling. It's not all of me. And it's just this morning. So already it's getting clearer. There's some other ways we can do it. Reframing our world. So one, my pet hate, the passive voice. Now you will know the passive voice because it's the one, if you read a form or a contract and your eyes glaze over and you can't get past the first sentence and your eyes just skim off the paper, and you'd rather pull your own teeth out than read the form, that's because it's in the passive voice. So what's the passive voice? It's where no one's in it. Here's an example. Say, for instance, if you had a sign at a Buddhist center that said, it's recommended that you take your shoes off when entering. So I'm just going to pause here and ask you, what do you reckon's wrong with that sentence? It is recommended that you take your shoes off when entering. Does it sound friendly? Have your eyes glazed over and you've lost the meaning of the sentence before you've even come to the end of the sentence? But why do you reckon it's unfriendly? What is it about that sentence? Anyone got any ideas? The passive voice. Anyone heard about the passive voice? Carol's heard about it. Jocelyn. Yeah. Oh, you're on mute. Hang on. Can't hear you. Oh, no, I can't hear anything. Can anyone hear Jocelyn? No. Oh yeah, recommended, not direct or friendly. So what it is, the passive voice has no person in it. There's no agent in it. It is recommended. There's nobody recommending it. So the public service often uses that voice because then when things go wrong, there's nobody to blame. You cannot find a person anywhere in that sentence to blame. But that's why it makes it impossible to engage with. And many news reports are also presented like that too, in this false idea of objectivity, as if objectivity is ever possible. But once I saw this, it was like a revelation to me, and it helped me just in and about the world of being able to actually reconnect. So here's a different way that we can do it with a person in there, which is, please leave your shoes in the racks is one, but also we ask you, like Rick Thompson asked you, we ask you to leave your shoes in the racks. So suddenly there is a person in there asking you. So suddenly there is connection. So that's one thing. Here's another one. 34 women were killed from domestic violence. So this was from, this is like 10 years ago in Australia was this statistic. Now it's 56 women a year. So it's one a week killed from domestic violence. But here again, it's a passive voice and there is no way for anybody to connect with it because there's no people in there. It's just a fact that is apart from us. But here's a way that we can reframe it. 34 men killed their wives this year. Now you get the enormity of it. Now it's like heart-wrenching. It's heart-wrenching for the wives. It's heart-wrenching for the husbands, for the kids. There's an action. There's people in there. But can you imagine if all the news reports were written like this? We would care about everything. So this also, to me, was such a revelation of how to start using our speech to help us connect, whereas most of the time our speech is to distance us. So yeah, nowadays it could be women killing men also, but the statistics in terms of violence, so one of the studies was the greatest fear that men have is of being humiliated, and the greatest fear that women have is of being killed. So it shows the discrepancy. One of for women, the most fear is a physical one. For men, the most fear is a verbal one. It's just a difference because of the difference in the power structure. But both of them is fear. Here's another one. how to reframe to a wider reality. And I love this one. So if you think, oh, I'm so depressed. So while we might think, I'm so unhappy or I'm so depressed, actually, one way that we can think about this is like with the flu. We don't say, oh, I am so the flu. We say, I have the flu. So what about instead of, oh, I'm so depressed, I have depression. Immediately, doesn't that help us? That gives us an opportunity for change right there. So we can use our humor and go, oh, I'm so flu. But there's another way that we can do it. Instead of saying, oh, I have depression, as a Buddhist, we can reframe it even bigger. And we can say, I am a budding Buddha undergoing depression. Now, that's actually much closer to the reality. If we're going to be factual, that's much closer to the facts. I am a budding Buddha undergoing depression. Who else? Oh, Miriam Margolyes, she was saying just even to change it with just how we talk about being fat. She said, I'm not fat. I'm experiencing obesity. It's not I. Where is the I? The I is not fat, but I'm experiencing obesity. So again, it leaves us room and it's actually closer to reality. So by using our speech, getting very specific, we can create that path to liberation and enlightenment. It's right there by reframing our world. So if you say, I'm a budding Buddha undergoing depression, even if you still feel miserable, it's not 100% miserable anymore. You've made some space and you've actually separated out the feeling of misery from the reality. And the feeling of misery, it's like clouds. You know, when the clouds fill the whole sky, it's almost impossible to see the brilliant blue space above it. But we can know it's there. And how we can know it's there is through our speech. There's another one in Australia. I don't know if you have it in America, this idea with violence, when people come up behind you and they give you, it used to be called a king hit. Do you have that in America? And it's like a one-punch knockout. Well, in Australia it's called, oh, so-and-so, he was king hit. So it meant that he was walking along and someone punched him from behind and he was knocked out. So it's kind of from the drunk culture. Anyway, about 5 or 6 years ago, the media in Australia decided to change the name. And when it's reported, instead of someone was king hit, now it's called a coward's punch. And it changed everything. It changed the status. There was a status in a king hit. But now it was a coward's punch. And now none of those mates want anything to do with that person. Just changing the name. It's so skillful. And so the media can actually be really instrumental in this. So while the media kind of calls it climate change instead of global warming or global boiling, as the UN just said yesterday, you know, just calling it the name, it changes what the thing is, how we relate to it, what we can do about it. But this one of the coward's punch, I just thought so incredibly skillful. So we can start doing that in our life too. We can really reframe our life so that nothing outwardly need to change, but we've created a pathway from here to enlightenment, to liberation, to happiness. So before we finish, questions, comments? Are there any American terms like this that have different ways of saying the same thing that you can think of? It might come to you the minute the class finishes. Right. Well, if there are no more questions, you can do a little dedication. Just because we're talking about speech, also from a Buddhist point of view, one of the ways that we can gentle our speech is by singing mantras. So that's a way of, instead of just being neutral, instead of all the internal chatter that goes on, you can put in place something really profound, like singing a mantra. So it's pretty impossible to be thinking about terms of revenge or resentment when you're singing a mantra. And in fact, through the power of the mantra, your mind and your speech is blessed. And if you walk around the house humming or singing mantras, it also blesses the environment, everybody else that hears it. The thing, though, when we chant mantras out loud, it has a resonance in our body, so it heals our body, it heals our speech. And one of the very interesting things that I read was like, you know, we feel it's us here and the Buddha's out there, but when we chant mantras, because the mantras are like a subtle, the Buddha's speech, it's a subtle form. It's the most subtle form. It's kind of like an abstract form of the Buddha's. When we chant the mantra, it's actually the air is in our body, the resonance is in our body. We are literally internalizing the Buddha's. Actually, literally bringing the Buddha's into our body, our physical experience. So it blesses our whole being, our body, our speech, our mental continuum. It's so incredibly powerful. So don't underestimate it. You know, even with animals, with our pets, they don't have any beliefs one way or another with religion. You can talk nicely to them and try and be calm and everything when they're distressed or when they're sick, and it has whatever kind of effect. The moment you start saying mantras, everything changes. Because the power of the mantra is really quite something. So to develop our speech and to bless our speech like that, it has such a far-reaching effect on us that we have no idea. You can't overestimate it. Okay, so let's dedicate. We've talked about the non-virtuous activities of speech, the 4 biggies: lying, harsh words, or harsh speech, divisive talk and talking behind people's backs, and then just meaningless chatter, and how all of them, how they can wreck our world and the worlds of others, but what we can do in their place, and even just abandoning them will, just imagine if everybody abandoned those 4 things, we would have a harmonious world, let alone doing the positive ones. So even in your own life, if you manage to zip it, it's going to have such a positive effect on everyone around you. And then we try and practice the positive ones in their stead, and immediately it will make us happier, and including create a positive environment. And just like there are, you know, on a good day, we wish to speak kindly and we wish to bring happiness to others, and we don't want to insult our friends. Same way, don't insult yourself. That inner self-talk, if we had a radio and we could broadcast that inner self-talk, like everybody, we'd never talk to anybody else like that, how we talk to ourselves sometimes. So this is where we've got to get objective and go, I'm a sentient being too. I can't talk to myself like that because I would never dare to speak to anybody else like that. So reframe it. And if you can't catch yourself, then write it down. Write down all the hate speech, see it for what it is, and then for each one, reframe it as I'm a budding Buddha, ... So let's dedicate all of our efforts. So the dedication, we can put it into words. We can think every single word and concept that we have talked about and thought about, discussed, all the questions, may each of those words be like seeds of light, seeds of realizations. Each of those words, a seed of a realization. And imagine all of them like seeds of light, just raining down into your mind, fertilizing your mind becoming a vast field of radiance. And we can continue to nurture those throughout the coming days and weeks and the rest of our life to bring them to fruition, our own liberation from cyclic existence and the ups and downs, and bringing every single one of our potentials, all of our good characteristics to fruition, to full Buddhahood for the benefit of all. And then may our speech always bring happiness and wisdom and peace to others and never harm them. All right, thank you so much, everybody. Next week is the last week. Oh my gosh. And it's going to be far simpler. It's about our physical actions, how we are in the world. So take care, and I hope to see you all again next week.
Thank you, Miffi.
Thank you. Thanks so much for coming. Bye.